So you want to build yourself a level 1 cert kit, do you? You don't like really tall rockets? Well, I got the perfect rocket for you. The Aerotech Sumo. Level 1 ready rocket, over 3 feet tall. Rugged construction. Built very similar to the Aero, but has its differences, its own uniqueness, especially with its piston system. See, level 1 ready. Up to H motors. If you're hardcore, maybe even a little more. But that's what it's recommended. And it does come with, you guessed it, launch lugs, conformal rail guides, and of course, the aluminum motor retainer. Whoa, retainer. All right, inventory check. It's a 4-fin kit. Of course, you know, they're already pre-molded, pre-airfoiled. 1 slotted 4-inch body tube. Of course, you got the instructions. And these are actually some pretty decently detailed instructions. A little more updated from the old school kits, because this one came out like in 2001. See? Beauty of 4-inch kits. You can shove your whole fist in there. A lot of working room. And of course, they're slotted. You got to punch them out. And that's your piston coupler. All right, we're not really coupling anything except making the piston. There's your motor tube. And your 4 airfoiled fins. That they are. And your motor retainer. Aluminium if you're fancy, or just aluminum. And this has, what is it? A 42-inch parachute. Similar material to the Aero. And a big old honking giant nose cone. At least giant for me. I believe it's also the same nose cone that goes to the G-Force and the Mega Initiator. So I think the G-Forces might be white. And a big old honking sheet of decals. And if you're into sumo wrestling, this is definitely for you. Kind of short and kind of chunky, like a sumo wrestler. Yes, a warrior of the sky, definitely. And we got plywood centering rings. Now, one way that you could build this is totally different and maybe make it like a more traditional high-power kit and omit most of the stuff. And I'm talking like the baffle system and all that. This doesn't take the mesh like the other kits do. You leave that wide open, and it has a diffuser plate. You'll see. 3 plywood centering rings. And that is the bulkhead to the piston. And that is the diffuser plate to the diffuser of the baffle. A pretty beefy shock cord that with that Aerotech elastic. And you got your shock cord piston buckles, clips that holds it in place. And of course, your 4-fin fin locks. Same baffle as the other kits. Can't really tell you what that was for at the moment, since this is just a voiceover. This has bigger conformal rail guides, I guess to fit the 4-inch frame. And of course it comes with the square launch lugs, just like the Aero. And an eye bolt. And if you notice, these are shaped differently. They have a shape to them. They're not exactly symmetrical. See the difference? See, those can go either way. So I had to figure out which way these would go, which I do, and I'll show you when the time comes. Which will be in the paint video, which will eventually come out at some point in the near future. But they are a little bit bigger, as you can see. All right, let's do an overview of the old instructions. Got your parts list. course, it's folded up. It was inside the tube. Trying to do all this one-handed. I want to get you a real good close-up right there. See? Definitely a little bit more updated. It almost like there were CG illustrations. Of course, this is an updated kit. The old school kit came with the engine hook. I believe it was around 2010, 2012 that Aerotech started releasing them with the retainer. Overall, this kit went together pretty decent as my first 4-inch kit. And it is slightly different than probably, let's say, a Lock 4 or another 4-inch kit that might be a quote-unquote certification kit. But for a stubby rocket, it's pretty darn tall, at least from what I'm used to. See, there's already that line that's already on there, so you want to go ahead and make your marks. One thing that I do with this build, and the only issue that really gave me a lot of issue, was in fact the piston, and it's pretty common for most people that build this kit, and they totally choose to just disregard that piston and actually reinforce the aft end with it, because the aft end is prone to taking damage upon landing and getting dent, banged, crushed, whatever. And just going with a Nomex wadding for the parachute. And I think that when I did build this, I had the intentions of kind of keeping the retainer close to the aft ring. So my entire motor mount's probably sticking up a little farther inside the rocket than I would like. And hopefully when the gases from the motor burns doesn't cause my aft end to burn up. So again, very similar to the Aero. We got to get the fin locks on there. So we'll start by taking our thumbnail or a pencil or maybe the back end of a hobby knife and just kind of chamfer the edge before we do any sanding to the motor tube or fin locks themselves. But usually I'll go with the fin locks first. I still seem to get good glue adhesion. And yes, we're going to follow the instructions as closely as possible. So super glue it is, because that's what was recommended. I'm going to put them to the test. If I can get a cert on this successfully with a super glued rocket, hey, then they know what they're talking about, right? And maybe I do too. You don't want these to be loose. You don't want them just sliding freely up and down. You want them to have a little bit of a hug to the motor tube. It will help you overall with the alignment. That way they're not moving around on you. And there is a rounder side to them and a flatter side to them, the fin locks. The flatter side is going to be sitting up against your centering rings when you glue them. So we're not fitting, so let's start with sanding the fin locks themselves, the inside, with some, let's say, 100 to 200 range grit sandpaper. Oh, I am actually sanding the old tube. Guess I was being a good boy. The thing about doing a voiceover a long time after you've actually filmed this, you kind of forget what goes on. So we're almost watching it at the same time, for the first time, if you're watching this for the first time. But this was a fun kit to put together. It's got an impressive size. You know, you're out in your driveway sanding it and people are driving by wondering what the heck has this guy got going on. And all you could do is just smile. Yeah, you like my big rocket, don't you? All right, so we got that sanded. Add a little texture to it, a little more bite for the glue, and hopefully we're not too loose. Tack cloth it off. Keep it clean when we do eventually glue it. The only thing that I used epoxy for is for the rail guides and for the piston itself, and that's what it tells you to do, at least for the piston. So you weren't quite fitting yet. So just do it until it go on there with, as long as they're just not really, really freely moving, you're good. We got to use at least a little bit of oomph to move them. I'm actually going to chamfer the edge there a little bit, because these were kind of giving me some issues going on. Nothing too crazy, but I had to do a little extra sanding. The arrows went on a little bit easier. .29mm, in case you didn't know, also comes in high power sizes. Now, normally you'd be the 29 40 by 120. That is the Hobbyline RMS. But they do make high power lengths and sizes and reloads for it that will not fit into the 40 by 120. So you got to pay attention to that. So now we're fitting. And right there I'm showing you the flatter side. See, it's got a little bit of a flatness to it. And you can kind of tell on camera that's a little more rounder. That's like flatter and kind of wider. It almost kind of tapers. Getting into building Aerotech kits, I really couldn't find anything that would tell me otherwise. But until you get to building them, it just makes sense. And this one was a little looser than I would like, but it didn't give me any issues. And the motor tube's setting up a little bit farther than I'd like, and I'd hopefully that when I do fly it eventually, it doesn't give me stability issues or issues with the motor mount and the centering ring sticking too far forward towards the forward end. Doing a test fit. That's the Hobbyline there. That's the 29 40 by 120. So yeah, if you buy a 29 120 load, it's not going to work in there. The only high-powered one that works in there is an H. I believe it's the H, or the G138 is still considered high-powered, and you have to have level 1 certification to get that engine. So you're just fitting those locks into those slots. And then you can kind of measure it from there to make sure that you have them spaced properly. And it's always recommended to keep a motor inside, an empty one, a spare one, an RMS. That way when you're pushing down to lock the fin and do your test fits, you're not crushing on the motor tube itself. Looks like we're going Star Wars now, not no Sumo. It's like some kind of TIE fighter or something. But yeah, that's the fin can pretty much. That's what it looks like without the tube over it. And you know it. We're going to fill in those spirals. And I got good news for you if this isn't your favorite part. This is going to be the last video where I do this on the build video. This is all going to be part of the finish build, the finishing and the painting videos. You can kind of consider this season 1 finale. I built the High Flyer, the Star Orbiter, and the Aero, and the Sumo, all back to back, and restored one of my old builds, my 2 Fat Boys. So 2 builds, actually. 24mm Fat Boy, and my oldest rocket, my regular 18mm Fat Boy. Had that one since about 2002. And of course, like the Aero and most Aerotech kits, these are kits that I've wanted since I was a kid. A teen, back in the early 2000s, shopping on the old dial-up internet. Looking up rocket kits, and then Aerotech will pop up. Or you find out about mid-power rocketry, look up mid-power kits. Aerotech's going to show up, or lock. You're going to see those and you're just like, man, those look a little more serious. More pricey. Now, a good price probably for a Sumo is going to be around 120-ish to 140-ish. I got this one, I think, for around 110, maybe on sale at HobbyLink. So let's just say 120 with shipping. I would try not to pay more than 130. For other kits around this size, can be on the pricey side. But you want to get certified. When I built this, even with super glue, it is sturdy. I'm just going to get those filled in. Just squeegeeing all that in there. Getting those spirals filled in for the paint. And I'm going to do the same thing like I did with the Aero. I'm going to fill in the launch lug slots. I'm not going to pop them out. All right, just getting that filled in. And of course, once it starts drying up and caking up, clean off your toothpick, reload. Yep, there were some dents on the tube. I went ahead and filled those in as well. Must have came when it was shipped or manufactured. Big old candy cane. Of course, I go around the fin slots themselves. But the launch lug slots got to get filled in because I'm keeping those on there. Aerotech's supposed to be coming out soon with some that are conformal rail guides that actually have a slot to fit in those slots. Well, that looks like a big old honking nose cone that needs to be trimmed and sanded so we can get it prepped for primer. And of course, paint. Got to get some of that flashing off of there. I tell you, you go from smaller kits to something like this, it's almost comical how large it is. And you gotta do the fins too. You gotta rough them up a little bit. And by roughing them up, I'm talking about sanding and not just, taking them in the corner and smacking them around. All the edges that are going to be glued or painted have to be sanded. So with the old hobby knife, with the sharp edge first, you'll see if we can just kind of peel that flashing off. And that was kind of satisfying, I'm not going to lie. Just be careful to not gouge into the plastic you actually want to keep. I'm doing it on the sharp side. Sometimes you get away doing it with the blunt side. Most of that's going to be sanded away, and then we're going to take the old tester's filler and put it on there. Just to get rid of any other blemishes from the molding process. Like how it just curls off. That's so nice. Like little pigtails. Wee, 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 wee. Something is wrong with that pig. You need to put it out of its misery. Just get as much off as you can. It'll save you time overall in the sanding process, but you'll sand it down. When we rough it up, I believe I took 220 to it. That'll flatten it out a little bit more. And then you put the filler on. Sander again. Sanding it also helps the filler stick. So now we're just going to take that nice shine off. We're going to ruin it and rough it up. I went in straight lines. It's probably recommended to go in circles, but I just went in straight lines. It painted nice. Just kind of evenly go around it. Maybe somewhat focusing on the flashing areas a little bit more, but you don't want to overdo it and then get too low on those areas. And just kind of curl over the tip so you can see what the sandpaper's hitting right there. It's not quite hitting the flashing there. It's a little lower. This is actually paint. Oh, look at me, curling it over. Guess you could do that too. Just try to get in there a little deeper. This is actually not sandpaper, it's actually gray paint. Sometimes I might make a bit of a fibber, you might say. That's sand. Paper. Sandy paper. Whatever old Aerotech uses to mold their nose cones, there's sometimes like little, like you can see them there, like little roundish circles that are also left behind on the molding process. Maybe that's where they inject the plastic in. And of course, you don't have to take all the plastic away. You don't have to make it too thin. And after this process is done, probably give it a wipe with some alcohol. Get you close up on the tip. And then we can put the filler on. And I am going to paint the shoulder. Whether that's a good idea or not. But I will tell you this. After I painted it, it does slide in and out of the body tube quite nice. It's kind of in the Goldilocks. The real concern is the piston. Because you have to peel the paper back. You have to. Because I sanded that thing for a week on and off. Like, no kidding. And I finally peeled the paper back, and then it was fitting just fine, but I'll explain that later in the video as well. Just getting every little nook and cranny. Anything that's going to touch paint. And of course, you'd sand it if it didn't fit right either, if it was too snug. alcohol on a rag or tack cloth. That'll do. The filler's still stuck. Take our old tester's filler, old trusty. Just one smooth motion. Put you a bead on down that line. Then take your finger with a glove, or if you're not comfortable doing that, maybe a popsicle stick or a Q-tip. And just smooth it out, squeegee it out. In one motion, don't go back and forth. It does not work. It dries up so quickly and it cakes up, boogers up on you real quick. Big old nose cone, kind of hard to keep it in the frame. Still got some on my finger. See if I can get away with it. Of course, you can't see a damn thing. Crappy cameraman. So it's looking like on my finger. And after we do this, at least at a minimum, give it 30 minutes to dry before you start doing any other sanding. See, this is kind of like a booger on the tip there. But, you know, we still got to do the rest. I was just seeing how far I could go with it. So put you another bead on the other side. Just smooth it out. Looks horrible, but it worked. Well, now that this is dry, we can start sanding on this. And of course, not show you on the camera. We have to use our imagination, see? See all those particles floating around right there? That's what you don't want to breathe in. Let's pretend I was wearing a mask this time, and that you're wearing one as well. To where it starts turning pink. And then run your finger over it, see if you can feel any extra ridges or anything. And every now and then you might want to stop and wipe it off just to get a cleaner look at what you've been doing. In all reality, I should have went ahead and sanded it first and then put the putty on. Because you thin out the outer layer of paper a little bit, that fills in those inner spirals that I didn't hit with it. And it'll help fill those in better when you go to prime it and then paint it. But not I. No. We're going to do it the half-daff way. Just a couple extra coats of primer. Just a tad. Try to do 3. Do a gray coat, then a white coat, and then another gray coat. Or maybe 3 or 4 more coats after that. So wipe it off with the tack cloth. Kind of give you a better insight of what you're doing. You sand that dent, see if it did anything. It's no bigger than my fingernail. But you can see what it filled in, see what's remaining. Dent, ding, little tiny scratch. Ain't any worse than the spirals. And it did wind up filling in just fine. It's really all you're trying to do when you're sanding is bring your high spots and your low spots together, making it flat overall. Think of it as like a road with a bunch of potholes. Trying to fill in those potholes and make your road flat. If you got any bumps in the road that are too high, trying to bring those down. The filler is the potholes. That's what's filling in the potholes. And any bumps in the road, you're just sanding those down. Notice, compared to the Aero, I kept the fin slots in. Those little tabs that are in there, I kept those in until after I was done with this part. See, it sanded over it just fine. Didn't rough up the edge of the fin slot itself. Made it a little easier leaving them in for the time being. Well, there's some nice shiny looking fins that have to be sadly roughed up. Get that nice shine off of them. Part of the process. Trying to break down that molding a little bit. Get the root edges. That's what's going to be glued. All this area is going to be glued. Of course, the sides of the fins, that's where it's going to be primed and painted. Don't oversand. You don't want them too short, throwing off your overall length of your tab. Just kind of getting that little groove right there. Till you stop seeing shine, basically. The glue process for this kit's a lot easier since it's a 4-inch kit. You've got so much more room to work in. So when you do your inner fillets, it's a lot easier. Even with super glue. If you take a good look at the sandpaper there, you can see just about how much it's actually caking up the sandpaper, which really wasn't that bad. All right, let's get these tabs out of these slots. Whatever you'd call those. Remnants from the laser cutting. You can stick your whole fist up in there and push them out if need be. Don't rip them out. That'll rip the cardboard sometimes. Leave you a big old gouge and you just rip it right on down the tube. You gotta fill that in. So I'm as easy does it. More patience you have, usually the quicker it'll go by. Because you have a lot less work to do. There it goes. All those are knocked out now. Now we can start working on the motor mount. Getting it fitted and glued together. There we go. See if we're sliding in right. Looks good. Let's see if our centering rings aren't getting in the way. See there? Definitely don't want the centering rings to be showing. They could be up against the fins a little bit. But see, that one's kind of showing a little bit right there. So I'm going to have to make an adjustment. But it's looking like that's how the aft's going to look, how it's going to sit. And of course, we're not going to glue the aft ring on yet. Do another test fit. And then we're going to start doing our final measurements. Just to make sure that, hey, that's how we want it to go. Of course, I deviated a little bit from how the actual measurements go. The actual motor tube itself is sticking a little bit farther ahead than it should, I believe. Hopefully it will not affect the stability of the rocket and possibly burning up my aft end. If you're going to favor towards the aft end. And always make a mark for my retainer just to make sure and kind of give me a reference point of how far it's going to have to sit. Also reminds me which way is the aft end. All right, time for some glue. Do not, when you make your fillets around the fin locks, don't glue all the way around it. Make sure that you glue in between the fin locks, because you don't want the glue getting in the way of the root edge of the fins. And the engine hook slot right there, that's not even going to be used. But don't run it there and don't let a bunch of glue drip everywhere. Then when we're done, let gravity do the work. Just let it dry. Maybe hit it with a little bit of accelerator. And of course, boom, put your centering on. Make sure that it's nice and snug up against it. That way it's gluing 90 degrees. And put another fillet there on the other opposite end of the aft ring. Or centering ring. Middle centering ring, that is. We can put another fillet here. Or just a fillet. Because that's just to glue that squished up from the other side. Right there you can glue around the engine hook slot. Didn't want glue to run down the engine hook slot, and that way the centering ring couldn't fit flush up against the fin locks. Of course, holding it like that, making sure that gravity's helping out, putting glue around right there. You can see where I put the glue. Definitely want to be more careful here. I know I mentioned something about the fins earlier, but this right here, you definitely got to be careful because that's where the fins are going to sit. That's what it says to do in the instructions as well. I didn't really have a lot of faith in super glue. Usually I shy away from super glue, but between the Sumo and the Aero, at least Bob Smith, that stuff's some pretty darn strong super glue. Stays pretty solid. Do another test fit just to make sure nothing moved before we glue the aft fin lock. And I also made a line right there to kind of keep track of where the fin should sit. See? Now we got it sitting like that and put a fillet of glue around that way. Of course, not putting it in between where the fin lock fins are going to sit. All right, now for where the baffle's going to go, we got to make 4 1/4-inch slits to help with the insertion of the baffle. So you just make 90-degree measurements. I don't even think I measured. Last time I used the Qualman to help me out with this. I just kind of eyeballed this. I don't think it's super important, but you want to try and keep them 90 degrees apart. And about 1/4 inch down. And you're going to slit with your hobby knife that line right there. And you take your baffle. See, it ain't going to fit now. It's supposed to sit pretty snug. Give it a chamfer. I'm just trying to see if maybe I can get away without having to make those slits. Well, we're going to do it. Fun part. Nice and easy. Get in there, get in there. All right, there's one. And then we got another one. And all right, got that one. And then number 3. Come on, we got this. Don't cut your fingers off. No. All right. Didn't hit my eyeballs. We're good. All right. Where's the cat? Make sure the cat ain't gonna jump up here. He's not. Okay, we're good. All right, we're good. And then you put a fillet of glue. I'm just doing a test fit. You put a fillet of glue around the baffle where it's going to attach to the motor tube there. Then once that dries, then you're going to add the front centering ring there. And what I'm showing there is we don't put the aft end just yet. That's where the aft centering ring is going to go on later in the build. And we're going to put our screw eye in. A lot of this stuff, I I probably didn't have to do because it's a 4-inch kit. Even I know it's a 4-inch kit. Remember, no mesh, no mesh. Yeah, but remember, it's a 4-inch kit. See, no mesh. A lot of these things that I did, you didn't have to do. You don't have to. Like leaving the shot cord in and stuff like that. You'll see what I'm talking about. Just giving it a sand just to roughen it up with the glue. And you know what? I didn't really get any good footage. It wasn't recording. Whoops. But it's glued in there. Take my word for it. And then you put another fillet here. So I didn't put the eye bolt in this time. That way I could leave it sitting like that, nice and flat. So if you kind of got your order of operations not in order, well, it can make it a little more difficult for you. So if you kind of follow how I did it, it might make it easier for you. Or if you got a total other way of doing it, then do it. So there's better ways, there's worse ways. This is how I did it. Then we give it a hit with the old accelerator. Just let it dry. Probably takes less than a minute. Now we're going to glue the forward centering ring to that ridge right there. And that's like that diffuser disc. You're going to screw that in eventually. The instructions say do not screw the eye bolt in. I say nay, glue it in. Because it's just going to twist off during the recovery. Just make sure you keep that right there at 90 degrees. People said in the forums to just go ahead and glue it because it's going to twist off on you as it descends under the parachute. So glue the eye bolt. Then you add your fillet there. Why not? Looks like a place of contact. Might add a little bit of weight to the big old stubby Sumo. Always make sure you stay mindful to wipe off your super glue, put the cap back on. Also make sure it's not plugged, because apparently it was plugged at this point and it was incredibly hard to squeeze. I had to take a needle and stick it down there, a pin. And then you'll notice my accelerator, the nozzle keeps blasting off right there, if you saw that. See, it's gone. So I actually had to buy a new bottle, an empty bottle. And just dump that in there. I don't know. I even tried super gluing it in there and that didn't work out too good, so. And narration me's going bye-bye and real-time me's taking over. Alright, so we've done all this. I know we've done all this, all this. We've done all that. And now we're here. I'm not going to put the fins in first. I'm going to do this, do the shot cord, and then put the fins in. And I guess probably do the piston as well. Oh, look at there. Epoxy! Wow, wouldn't you know it? They actually want you to use epoxy. Oh boy, what's the world coming to? I don't see any reason why we'd have to do it this way. So I'm thinking And it says no glue. Doesn't seem like it matters which way this goes. There's no up or down. Get it started. Should just be able to feed it on in. Can't put this in crooked though, like we did with the arrow. So definitely got to make sure this goes in pretty good. Alright, so now we started it. Just got to He-Man it on there. So use your strong hand. Oh boy. Well, I guess I wasn't strong enough, so we're going to use a screwdriver. Make sure it goes on there pretty decently straight. Because it just got delay. Well, maybe that don't matter because it's going to, so it can wiggle. It should be fine. It can wiggle a little bit because it's going to sit on the baffle. Right? And it, in fact, specifically says, do not glue the screw eye into the ejection baffle, which we did with the arrow. Oh boy. Yeah, that shouldn't matter because this is just a slightly different design. Remember, we're not using that mesh. So this has a, we're using a piston ejection with this one, so it should be a totally different thing. So now I'm just going to feed this bad boy in. It's going in way easier. I'm guessing that disc kind of diffuses the ejection gases a little bit more. So if we just put it in there till it's decently tight, I don't want to strip it, but that's as far as it wants to go. So yeah, that's sitting not super straight. That's how it's sitting, and I'm not going to force it on there to strip it. So I'm guessing if it does start to loosen up on you after you launch it a couple times, you got to check it. Get in there and retighten it down.